Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Sheen. I am an Oxford and Cambridge graduate, currently working as a strategy consultant in Dubai. And on this channel, we explore strategies to help women advance in their careers. But the tips can also be useful for men, I've been told. So anyway, let's deep dive into today's video. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about a skill that has been pretty centric to my work as a consultant, which is how to take notes, especially in meetings. Note-taking, as you can tell, whether you're in university, you're in school, everyone talks about how to take notes, how to organize your notes, how to make them look pretty. But in a work environment, especially as a consultant, it is not about making it look pretty. It is very, very to the point. It's there for a reason. We're taking the notes down for a particular reason, and that's all that matters. So the point here is to capture the right information in a way that you can then reuse that information yourself or pass it along to someone else in the team to work on. So why is note-taking relevant at all, right? In consulting, there are a few reasons why we do still take notes. And notes can be taken on a laptop or on with pen and paper. But most people do it with pen and paper because, especially if you're talking to the client, you don't want to have a laptop in front of you if it's in person, of course, and if it's not on Zoom. It creates a barrier, and if you're just constantly typing and looking at your screen, you're not really paying attention, and the person might feel like it's not really a good relationship vibe. But obviously, if you're on calls or if it's an internal meeting, then a lot of people just think it's easier to type it away. So that's why I think it's good to have both skills, but I don't think they differ that much in the sense that for me, what matters is the template that I use, and that stays the same whether I'm writing it on paper or whether I'm typing it on Word. So that doesn't really matter. But the point here is, right, that a lot of times you're in conversation with your team, with your leadership part of the team, or just the clients, and they are giving you a lot of new information, especially if it's like an interview style meeting where you're there to collect information about the client or the new task that you're being assigned. So that's a lot of new information that you need to capture. So of course, when someone is talking, they're talking quite quickly, and it can be quite hard to remember everything that they're saying, especially because it's new information. There's a limit to which we can absorb all of this. So that's why you take notes. And the other thing is, as a junior, I say junior, but I just mean that when you are the most junior member of the team, it is basically an expectation that you're there to take the notes, right? Because everyone else can be a bit more actively involved in the conversation than you are. So you should be taking notes because you can focus entirely on this task of taking notes and listening to what everyone else is saying. So therefore, it's a good skill to have, especially because then you are actually adding value to the team and you are helping your team with a task that you are kind of responsible of. But also, what I've found quite useful with note-taking is that you take notes about everything to do with the teamwork. So even though you have been assigned, let's say, task A out of this project and someone else is working on task B, but when it is being discussed in a meeting, it's always good to still take notes for the other task as well, because somewhere down the line, you might just have to jump ship and join task B, or at some point you're done with your task and then you're asked to help someone else, and you don't want to be completely brand new to this, because then it's annoying because they have to bring you up to speed, and it's also harder for you to try to catch up on what's happening while the job is still progressing. So then it's good to always be in the loop. It helps you be in the loop so that whenever it's time for you to then join another task, you are ready and you know what's happening. Mostly, of course, you won't know everything, but broadly you're aware of the progress on that front as well. And finally, now the way we work, especially as a team, is all very collaborative. So, someone might not be in the meeting, but they need to know what happened in the meeting, or even you were not part of the meeting, but you need to know what happens, and everything needs to be documented so that if there is a new person that joins the team further down the line, it's an easy way for them to pick up on what has been discussed previously and how are we doing progress-wise, other than just, talking to someone else and trying to spend time learning about what's been going on. This is a short form of going through what has happened throughout. And now coming on to the general tips of writing notes. I think these are pretty obvious, but still worth mentioning. So, of course, do not write everything that's being said. You don't want to just write absolutely everything, because you are not able to do so unless you write at tremendous speed. But even then, it's really hard to write everything that's being said. And if it's something that you already know, or it's information that the team already has, you don't necessarily need to write that. But again, it's not black and white. But what you want to write is any kind of feedback, any kind of task and actions that you need to do for the next time, any kind of red flags that have been raised, or any kind of new information. If they're adding new data or stuff like that, then you write it down. So it's this skill of trying to differentiate between what is information we already have, so I don't need to write this down, and information that we do need from now on. So that's number one. Tip number two is just learning how to use shorthand. And I don't mean that you need to learn any kind of like formal shorthand methods or anything. I never did. But it's just a shorthand that works for you, because you're the one who needs to understand this. And most of the time, for example, for me, is I write with pen and paper. I never type. So then it's easy for me to write in a language that I understand, using abbreviations that I understand. And I think that works for me, and I'm sure it works for everyone else as well, because you will know that, I don't know, it's like, by the way, BTW, like, it's a bit of text language for me when I write. So I will shorten everything. Like, you're not going to write January, you're not going to write the whole name of the client. You need to have a short form for that. You're not going to write the name of someone on your team that needs to do something. You just write their initials. So it's just coming up with these shorter version of what needs to be said and written down. So short form is very, very helpful. And never, ever write long sentences. Like, you do not want to write long sentences, because you will not read long sentences. They're not useful, and they take way too much time. And the person has reached sentence number 4 while you're still writing sentence number 1. So that's not a good technique. Tip number 3 is to just have like titles. So break down where you're writing down the notes into sections, so that even when you're listening, okay, this is action, it goes under action. This is a key general discussion point, it goes under discussion point, so that you're not just putting everything together and then having to filter it out later. So just be prepared with the subsections, and you can just write whatever is happening under the relevant subsection. Which brings me on to my 4th tip, which is prepare your template before you go into the meeting. So having this like kind of general backbone written down is really helpful, because then when you go in, you don't have to then start jotting down everything while people are introducing themselves. You just have the outline ready to go, and as soon as the meeting starts, you can just start filling in the relevant sections. Which brings me on to the next section, which is actually how to prepare this template. So I thought it would be easier to show you how I do it by writing it down on paper. So first things first, you need the date. I know, very, very basic, but you need the date, you need the name of the client, and you need the objective of that meeting. Is it just a status update, progress update, or is it just, kind of like clarification? Is it a steering committee meeting, which happens, when there are specific time in the timeline of the project where it's let's reassess where we are, let's see the deliverables that we have at this point and discuss it and plan the next part of the project. So I usually just put the objective there at it, and this, this beforehand. What is the point of this meeting? What are we discussing? And what do we want to get out at the end of the meeting? So these are the top 3 that you definitely need to have. And then the next thing is just the attendees, so who are here. And I usually split this into 2. I put the members of the team, internal team, so people from my company, and then the attendees from the client side. And then I fill in these of who are the people there. And that's very useful, because you need to know who was there and who was discussing what, and it's just helpful. I mean, you need that kind of information. And then the next part is not necessarily what will be discussed first, but this is the part that will be the most relevant after the meeting. And this is the next steps, or the to-do list, or the action points, whatever you want to call them. But this is this main takeaway from the meeting. And again, through different iteration, having worked with different people, I have learned what the best way to do this is from my seniors. And the best way to do this is to have a 3-column kind of table, and you have the actual action, so the task that needs to be done, and then the owner of that action, so who will be doing this, whether is it like the internal team, or is it the client team, or is it a third party. So you just need to know who is in charge of this, and then the expected deadline. So by when does this action need to be done? Because again, this is helpful in terms of if there's something that needs to be done by tomorrow as opposed to something that needs to be done by next month. So this gives you a very clear visual. But I also find that this is helpful when a task has been announced, for you as a cross-check to remember to be like, is it clear who needs to do this? And is it clear by when do we need to do this? And then you get to ask these questions in the meeting and not having to go back later on for an email being like, sorry, we forgot to clarify this in the meeting. So this just helps you making sure that you are clear by the end of the meeting as to what needs to be done, who is doing it, and by when do we need to have this done. And then of course, the final part of the minutes is just the key discussion points, or just like general discussion points. So this is the part where you jot down anything that has been discussed that is new information, that is not necessarily a task that needs to be done, but it could be feedback, it could be alignment on some stuff, it could be like this thing is good or this thing is bad, this needs to be changed in this thing. So you can have the discussion points here. For example, if you have a task of this part needs to be changed from A to B, you can have this in the action point, change from A to B, change need to be done by the internal team by next week. But then in the key general discussion points, you can have A needs to be changed to B because A was wrong for these reasons and B needs to look like this. So then you have a bit more details and you expand on the action points, but also just anything else that comes up in the meeting. So anything that doesn't go into the previous sections will go in that final section. And then this is how I do it. I write it by hand most of the time. And then I do tend to type it up, and it gives me time to then go through and just very quickly change anything that I did not write properly. And I do this right after the meeting because you still remember everything that has been discussed. And then I save it in a format that I will remember what it is. So this is a skill that I learned because I was always awful. Everything was saved as template 1, worksheet 1, part 2. And this is not helpful when you're going through your folders looking for something specific. So whenever I'm saving this, I will put the date first. And the format I use is year, month, date, and then underscore, I think that's what it's called, yeah. And then meeting minutes, underscore, client name, and I save it. So that's it. You know when this meeting was and who was it for. And there we go. You have it. It's saved. It's somewhere, and it's usually on a shared drive, so everyone has access to it. And let's say further down the line, the client is like, but we discussed a month ago that we needed to do this. You can go back to the minutes to check whether this was the case or not. And this is always useful. And meeting minutes, as we've discussed, is just really, really useful. But also outside of meeting is just really good. My advice is to just always take notes, especially when you're new to the field. Whenever there's a discussion happening, whether it's an internal call and the partner is discussing with your manager is discussing with someone else on the team about something relevant to a part of the work that you are not involved in, it's really good to take notes, especially when feedback is being given, because you can learn through someone else, right? So then you can learn that, oh, okay, so this is the better version of doing this same task. And also it just gives you a bit more of an overview of the project, so you can then contribute to the conversation, you can bring in more to the table, because having a very focused, narrow point of view of the project doesn't help you contribute to the larger conversation. And you want to be able to do that because then it is more interesting for you and you're adding more value to the team. So that's why taking notes is very important. I hope this was helpful, and if you liked it, please like the video. What is the saying? If you like this, then please like the video, share it, and please consider subscribing if you like this channel. And I will see you in the next one with more tips on how to do better at work. I'm also learning. I'm on this journey with you to learn, so let's all learn together. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.